Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of The Brain Food Show. Hot off the back of recording our last episode, which we wrapped up about 5 minutes ago, in between which I got some coffee, spilt my coffee everywhere, and made myself some more coffee, which was a brilliant break. But you guys have waited like a week in between. Mm-hmm. So welcome back to the show. Hey, David, how's it going? I feel like I do these pleasantries again with you, but we were just talking to each other, so it's weird.
You know, I think in the last episode you didn't ask me how I was doing, so thanks for that.
I'm so sorry. Where are my British manners? How are you doing?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can we talk about something you recently bought, which is extremely cool, or is that under wraps?
What did I buy? Oh.
Dude, what did you buy?
I told you I can't remember anything. Yes. Yeah, okay, yeah, we can talk about that.
Cool. Well, what did you buy?
An aeroplane.
You did buy an aeroplane. Dude, it looks so cool.
It is cool.
Because, I mean, regular view... Yeah, go on. Tell me more.
Yeah. No, it is cool. I mean, it's like a 1977 Piper Arrow, or 1977, sorry, 1977. That's a big difference. Piper Arrow. But this is the nicest Piper Arrow I've ever seen. Like ever. Anyway, most of them look like something from 1977. And like when I trained in was the Archer, which is sort of a step down. It's got like the Arrow's basically got like retractable gear and adjustable prop, but a little faster than the Archer. But otherwise, it's kind of the same plane. And most of them, they smell like something from the 1970s, and they look like. But this one is immaculate. Like I don't know, this guy took care of it.
You sent me these pictures. It looks so cool. It's red,
red and white. Yeah, it's cool. And it's not like crazy expensive. Like $600 a month plus, it's a plane. So it's like a boat where you buy a boat and it's like kind of not expensive at first, but then like everything is expensive from there.
What do people say? Like the two best days you own a boat are the day you buy the boat and the day you sell the boat.
Exactly. But this one has been well taken care of. Never used as a trainer, which is another thing. Most of them have had the life beat out of them from being a trainer plane, but this one never used, which is rare for an Arrow, which is probably also why it looks so nice. It's nice. Interior was redone not that long ago.
Do you have it in your possession yet? Because I know it's halfway across the country or something.
No, I got to go get it. It's in North Carolina. I can either have someone ferry it back or I can fly it back. And this time of year is not like ideal going over the Continental Divide and everything for weather and whatnot. But I could have. But I posted on a piloting forum, and there was tons of people. There's lots of airline pilots right now with nothing to do, and so it has to be so they can come along because the insurance actually requires me to have I think it's 15 hours dual time, even though it's going to take like 2 or 3 hours. I mean, it's basically what I flew before, but they require 15 with an instructor.
Of what
and
time?
So dual time. So you got to have an instructor next to you to twiddle their thumbs really to twiddle their thumbs. And but I actually thought it'd be a good learning experience. Fly back from North Carolina to Bellingham all the way across the country with an airline pilot who's got thousands of hours, and I'm probably going to learn a lot if I did it that way. And I mean, most of the time, they're supposed to be instructing me, and there will be some of that I imagine in the beginning just to get a feel for the plane, like a couple hours before we leave. But then after that, whatever, we'll fly back and I'll probably learn a ton. So that's sort of my plan. But that will require me to take some good amount of time off work. So I may say, okay, that would be super fun and good learning, but I may just have someone fly it back for me, and then I can get my training at my leisure, without interrupting work or anything like that.
Where you got somewhere to park it and stuff? Because you live in in Washington State.
Yeah, Bellingham area. I could either take it to the Bellingham airport or the Skagit airport. I kind of live in between the two, and I think I'm going to go with Skagit because it's not towered. And they also have new hangars being built soon. And hangar space is really hard to come by. It's good. It's going to be fun.
Well, I just thought that was extremely cool because you sent it me the other day, and I was like, that's pretty sick. Yeah. So congratulations.
It's been a long process. I was surprised. Yeah, buying a plane. Buying a plane is, at least in my experience of it, was it's way harder than buying a house. Like really, there's like so many hoops to jump through and whatnot, which good. It's pretty much done.
I guess it's also there's less people buying planes, so there's less infrastructure.
Well, and they're all old. Like they're all old, like the aging fleet, and then you want to make sure the wings aren't going to fall off and stuff like that. So that's always important. But no, it's good. It's a Piper Arrow 3 turbo, so it's got that turbocharged engine with the modifications to make it so the engine doesn't blow up, because that particular engine doesn't have a good reputation before the mods were made, but this one's got the mods, so it's good. It's good.
It has just one engine, right?
Yeah, and so if I happen to die
It's
on the
pretty
way
bad if
back,
that blows up.
you know,
Don't
at least
do
we're
that.
like
Yeah.
a month ahead on podcasts and stuff. So
That's true. That's
Okay.
great.
good stuff. You'll have time to, you know, find my replacement.
Oh god,
Yeah.
dude, that is morbid.
Yeah. And then, that'd be quite funny. Retrospective. You're like, hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Brain Fruit Show with a new host. As we discussed
We
last
don't really
time.
have a plan. If one of us kicks it, we should probably have a plan.
No. Yeah. You
We're
know.
both young. We're, you know,
Deal with it.
I don't think, well, other than the fact you fly your own bloody plane, which I know is dangerous.
It's
so-
not. No, here's the thing. It's actually statistically not that much mile for mile. Hour for hour, it is in general aviation more dangerous than driving a car. But mile for mile, it's about the same. Like, it depends on how you want to quantify things and
Yeah.
stuff
But
like
how
that.
many times are you going on a massive journey and you're, you know?
Yeah. But the thing about it is, it's actually safer if you two things. Number one cause of dying in a plane crash, general aviation anyway, is engine failure. But you think, oh, engine failure, that must be so dangerous. But no, it's not the engine failing for failing. It's because you ran out of gas. That's like the number one reason engines fail. Yeah, and that's a little bit more complicated, especially in the old days. It was a little more. It's harder to do now unless you're just stupid, because in the old days you might be flying and you can't go below the cloud. Like you can't if you're something called VFR pilot, which that's most people. You're not allowed to go through the clouds unless it's an emergency. You can declare an emergency and then you can go through the clouds. But even then, that's kind of dangerous if you're not familiar and it's foggy. Like if it's really foggy all the way down the surface, you're not going to have a good time. That's where a lot of the accidents come from, is like VFR pilots finding themselves in that situation. And so you might be flying around and you can't get down, or the weather's in your way. And so you have to go around. And if you didn't plan ahead properly and maybe you can't get back to an airport or whatever. So you run out of gas, but that's really just poor planning and being stupid. And it's a lot harder now, because in the old days you could get lost. If you get lost nowadays, I don't even know what you're doing. Cause this plane it's even got some older avionics, and it's still got like 3 GPSs built in, and it's got like, you got your phone and your tablet and like all the apps that get you, and you're not going to get lost. It's just not going to happen.
Do you have
anymore.
a parachute in the plane?
No, that is the one thing I really wanted that, but this one doesn't. This one's something called a certified plane, and so you can't even get it in this. It's not even an option. If it was an experimental, I could just, make that happen. But no, that's the one thing I didn't.
Can you carry a parachute, like a regular parachute?
Yes.
Can you buy one of those off eBay and just shove it in the back seat? Because I mean, maybe it's not going to work out. But even if I didn't know how to use it, I'd feel more comfortable just having one in the back seat.
Yeah, better is if they have the so if you're a stunt plane, or a test pilot, they have special ones made that are actually very compact compared to a normal parachute, so they're very comfortable to sit. And some people do, when they're testing out planes and stuff, they wear those. But it's not really like, honestly, flying at night over the mountains. Flying at night. That's the one thing I actually enjoy flying at night a lot better. The air is really smooth and all that. And with the modern stuff, you'd have to be an idiot to run into a mountain or something. And so, like in the old days, that's actually a lot more dangerous. But nowadays,
next podcast, unfortunately, David has flown into a mountain.
Well, that is the thing with the
FAA report says extreme overconfidence.
There's this channel called Air Safety Institute, and I've watched like all their videos. They break down these accidents and what went wrong and all this, and you just never want to. Like the takeaway is, you never want to be featured in one of their videos. It's not good. But they do a good job. But no, that's going over the Continental Divide with the winds being as unpredictable and stuff. But that, again, you just look ahead. Don't go if it's super, because you can have downdrafts that can exceed the ability of your plane to climb, and then you run into a mountain. But just don't. If the full plane parachute, more comfortable flying at night. That's because usually you can put it down in a field somewhere if the engine dies or whatever. It's not going to be a problem most of the time. But in any event, yes.
Okay, so look. Just don't get yourself killed, because I don't know how to do your job.
No, and then, the other common way people die is spinning it either on takeoff or on that base to final turn. And that, the one thing nice about the Piper Arrow, people call it like, so the Archer and the Warrior were shown in this series. It's like a flying refrigerator is what people call it. And the Arrow is like a flying refrigerator with a rock tied to it. And so if you cut the power, it just drops. And this is an advantage when you're landing, because you can actually land pretty fast and not bounce it. And so if you have that extra speed, you're not going to spin it. Once it's on the ground, it will stay on the ground because it's a flying refrigerator, basically. So, yeah. Two things.
Tell you what.
Safer than driving, then, is the point of all of that.
Yeah, per mile, but
less forgiving. less forgiving. You can't just hop in your plane and go flying. You do have to do all your prep, all your weather, look at all that. You have to plan your trip in detail.
You can bend the statistics however you like.
Yeah.
But
So
flying
whereas you can just
private planes is dangerous.
Yeah, you can just hop in your car and go somewhere, and you don't have to worry about any of that. And so as long as you do your prep, you're good. But most people do their prep, and you go over the plane. You look over every single time. You look over the plane, make sure it's good. You inspect it. 15, 20 minutes. You're looking over everything, making sure it's good. You do run up, another 15, 20 minutes. It's good. It's good. It's safe.
When the world has finally stopped ending and
Yeah.
we see each other again at something, I would hope to go up in your plane. I think that would be
No.
if you have me. That would be fun.
Yeah, that would be good. Travel around. It would be a lot quicker than our last road trip and whatnot to go places. It cruises
That's
about 180 miles an hour or so at about 8,000, 9,000 feet. So it's
very nice.
somewhat speedy. Yeah.
Very nice. Should we?
We should get into the podcast because we've already turned off all the people watching on YouTube have already clicked off, except for the aviation enthusiasts, which is the aviation channels are actually pretty popular on YouTube. And I was thinking just for fun, it might be fun to do one of some sort. Like I've talked about before doing that. So you have like the comedians in cars, would it be like experts in planes, but like not that title, where you just bring up an expert and you talk about an interesting topic, where you fly around in beautiful scenery, like really gorgeous shots, which Bellingham, Washington has like a ton of awesome stuff, for scenery. I think it could be good visuals.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Let's do what we're doing on this channel. Then.
Yeah. Well, this is good that we had this padding because this is a really quick episode today. Yeah, so it all works out.
Intentional.
Yeah. So the appetizer today, we're going to talk. Well, I should say the whole thing. We're doing the origin of chopsticks, knives, forks, spoons, and the fortune cookie. So the appetizer today is chopsticks. We're going to start with that. So these were first used around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago in China, or so. It's not really like super clear because the first ones were made of like twigs, and so they didn't last. But it seems like that's when people first started using them. And you might think that's kind of weird, like you got rice is super popular and everything. That seems like a weird choice and whatnot. But it turns out that, of course, the more traditional rice, less processed, is extremely sticky. As of course, if you have actual stuff, it's more like the westernized rice is very processed, and like a spoon or is a little bit more efficient. But yeah, so this sticky rice. So, but anyways, so if you fast forward,
sticky rice.
Yeah.
Like,
it's good.
It's it's real good.
Yeah. So if you fast forward though to 1200 BC, that's when we had the first examples of chopsticks being made of bronze, which have actually survived then to today. But it still wasn't like super popular, and it's kind of difficult to nail down first, firm dates on things on this. But at this time, it's noteworthy here, that wasn't really used for eating like we would think of it. Today, it was more just like for poking and like grabbing stuff out of your cooking things. So you didn't really sit down at the table and eat with it. That wouldn't seem to occur until around 500 AD or so. Started to be using as table utensils and stuff. And so what caused the switch, and why did these cultures adopt that instead of like the spoon and all this, which the spoon, as we'll get into in a bit, was around in China. So why did they switch? Why would you have a spoon and then switch to chopsticks? Like this seems
I feel like I know
odd.
the answer to this, but I'm going to spoil it because have we done a video or something about this?
I don't know. I'm sure you've covered it somewhere on one of your channels.
Let me just guess. I won't spoil,
Yeah.
but you can tell me if, because I'll say it cryptic enough that you'll know. Does it have something to do with small pieces of meat?
Yeah. That's
Okay,
what
cool.
I'm about to actually mention. So so according to the California Academy of Science Anthropology Department, they state that around the time this sort of switch happened to starting to really use these as table utensils, there was a major population boom, and this resulted in a scarcity of resources and whatnot. And this also, around this same time, there was a shift from, like whole slabs of things and whatnot to start cutting things into tiny pieces. So, they would cook faster. And of course, if you have less or whatever, but mainly it seems like, well, at least according to them, it cooks faster. And so this seemed to precipitate the change there. And so when you have tiny pieces of meat, you're not going to like, before you would stab it with your knife, or, like if you had like a spoon of some sort, you could, but most people with stabbing knife, it was like a big thing. But when it's a tiny thing, you don't need to do that. You can just pick it up with your chopsticks, and it's still, you kind of think the spoon's superior though, right? Like still, but there was something else that goes into this also, is that
I don't know,
Confucius.
man. If someone said, hang on, just one sec. If someone was like, we're going to present you with a random meal. You don't know what it is. do you want spoon or knife? Like sharp knife. Before, knowing what the food is. I'd choose sharp knife.
Yeah. Yeah,
I reckon, because then you can do the stabby thing. Like when I go camping and I forget my cutlery, like having a penknife, you can cut up whatever you're cooking. You can then stab it. You can kind of scoop it onto the side of the knife and try not to cut your mouth. You know?
Yeah. Well, and the spoon is very useless when you're talking like large slabs of things. Like, I mean, sure, you can pick it up and then you gotta
with a spoon?
You just gotta switch to your fingers. So yeah, I suppose. But when you're talking small cut up things, though, the spoon is quite handy for quickness of eating. But yeah, no, they switched. And so one of the other contributing factors is generally attributed to the teachings of Confucius, who believes that knives were not appropriate to eat with, as Confucius supposedly said. Here,
the honorable and sorry, just getting ahead of myself. The honorable and upright man keeps well away from both the slaughterhouse and the kitchen, and he allows no knives on his table.
Yeah, so if you don't have knives and you just have a spoon, then yeah. And
who's slaughtering all the animals?
Yeah, and this is I actually want to do a video on this. Like, did Confucius say like any of the things that we say, like that people attribute to him, or is it just like this historic thing of like just like we every wise but like the historic version
Mark
of that,
Twain,
where like over
Oscar
centuries,
Wilde.
like every wise quote or whatever gets attributed to him. And I actually want to do a video on that. Like, did Confucius say the things he said or whatever? Be the title. I was going to assign that. We have a linguist, a PhD linguist on staff now. I was going to give that to her because she did a really good one on what would happen. That's all we have on staff now basically is PhDs for the most part, which is great. So she did one on if you took random children and put them together, raise them together, babies, but no one ever talked to them, would they create their own language?
This already?
Yeah, we did. It did really well. And she covered that one because that was that was actually one of her. She had a paper on it actually, which is why that was one of her example research papers that she did like personally. And I was like, hey, can you modify that research paper to be like a little less formal, be more like what we would do. And so that was her first one. But she's working on a really good one now, and I can't even remember what it is. But she suggested it, and I can't remember. But it's good. It's going to be good when she's done with it.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was, but it's language related. But anyways, I thought I'd see if she wanted to do this one too, because I'm quite interested. But in any event, so it is also thought this Confucius thing might be why the Chinese chopsticks are traditionally blunt rather than pointy at the tip. So the pointy actually helps if you want to stab stuff. It still kind of works that way. You can spear food, but they don't. That's not traditionally the way it is in Chinese chopsticks.
Having one pointed chopstick would be awesome.
Yeah.
Just having one of them sharp, so you could spear something.
Yeah, exactly. This sort of spread from there to Japan and Korea and Vietnam and stuff. That is the and before we finish this section, wait, no, that's later. So never mind. That is the end of this section. All right, so now we're into the ad, which I was just looking at side projects. So I thought like a better, more effective ad to convince people is actually to talk about specific videos. So what do we got here on side projects? We got the which is already doing. Are you
plugging my new channel? You hero.
Yeah. No, I was just looking at it because I watched I saw that it like existed the other day, but I haven't actually really looked at it. It's doing quite well, isn't it? Right off the bat, it's a project.
So far, so good.
Those projects, people love them. That was mega projects too. Like you launched it, and a week later, it was like one of your most. Was it the most popular channel within like a week or two?
Yeah. It's crazy. Like,
yeah, as far as views per video.
Views per video. I mean, it has nowhere near the views per month of something that's been around longer. But views per video does pretty great for some reason. Yeah,
or like right off the bat, it was crazy. So what do you got here? You got theoretical megastructures. We might one day.
Oh yeah, dude. This was just because I love Star Trek. Like I wanted to do more about Dyson spheres and stuff, and I don't know. Yeah. I love all that stuff.
The London Bridge. The London Bridge. That was the one I watched. The London Bridge on an Arizona icon since 1971. That was actually pretty interesting. Moving the London Bridge.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I absolutely didn't write it, but I'm glad you.
What's funny about that is someone asked on Highlight History if I watch like your other channels or whatever, and I was like, dude, I don't even watch Today. I found out, like, not really.
Yeah, dude, it's like, how much time do you think he has?
I know what it says. I mean, like, there was that brief period when we started doing more asides and stuff in it, and then I watched for a little bit just to sort of see what you were doing and just kind of see. It was kind of entertaining. But then, like, I don't have time to watch. And you have
what
a lot
it
of
is.
channels and videos.
You know what's in them.
I know in general.
For the most
there.
part.
Yeah, exactly. So, no.
Yeah, so it's basically a new channel. I think there are 12 videos up on there now, so there's 3 a week. And yeah, like, we did one about Brasilia, which is the capital of Brazil that essentially was made from scratch in the center of the country. The Jedi Tower, that one's doing well. That one was like a day ago, and it's already at 52,000 views, which I'm quite pleased with.
Yeah,
that was a skyscraper they just stopped building, and it kind of dives into why. I'm not sure why I made that video 7 minutes long. Because if it's 8 minutes long, then I can have a mid-roll ad. That was a terrible business decision. Oh, wait, there's one here that's 7 minutes and 57 seconds long. That was an error.
I know. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah.
Well, people always like, whenever we release a video, it used to be, at the 10-minute mark, you could get a mid-roll. And we'd make a video that's 10 minutes and 1 second long. And people are like, oh, I see what you did there. You're just greedy. You want the mid-roll ads. And then I'd point to the dozens of videos. It's just because I never make any effort to get it to any particular time.
No.
And then it's like, but we've also made like tons of videos that are 9 minutes and 59 seconds long.
Yeah, the only one that I actually look at is Fact Quickie, and where I very specifically have a word count I'm trying to hit that 3 to 5 minute mark, and it has to be in that. So Fact Quickie, but I'm actively trying to make it shorter. So like, and then I also have
mid-roll ads. Your CPMs are going to suffer.
No, it's not gonna be good for that. And then I'm also making a 60 or 90 second version for like Facebook and stuff, and whatnot. And that is difficult. Let me tell you, to compress like a 15-minute video down to 60 or 90 seconds is super, super hard. But if you're gonna post on Facebook, it has to be
Forks.
60. Yeah. It is difficult.
They came about from some woman who had a fork.
Yeah, so what I had to do is I had to record myself a lot, and I looked back at past videos as well. And then I took the average of my cadence of speech, what word count hits the 3 to 5 minute and the 60 to 90 second mark. And then that's the only one I actually look at word count and like how much time it's going to be. So highlight history we got is doing extremely well for the little relaunch. So what do we got? We got the remark. Oh no. We got The Tale of Two Brothers is published, which we mentioned before. The Devil and the Absolute Legend is what that one's titled. Really good. People should go check that out. Stealing the Crown
Why
Jewels.
am I upside down in all the thumbnails?
I just do that sometimes because sometimes it like fits better with the picture, and also I just think it's more eye catching.
I guess it's
that
like
one.
Simon upside down.
Yeah, that one you weren't going to be upside down, like the female U.S. president one, which we've made a podcast episode of that, but I just wanted to put it on highlight history because it's really good. You weren't going to be upside down, but I couldn't quite fit you in the way you're holding your hand and stuff, but I wanted that one, and so I just put you upside down because then it fit. Stealing the Crown Jewels. What Killed George Washington? That one's actually pretty interesting. Yeah, it's good.
Was it his doctors? Oh, it was his doctors. That's in the title.
Yeah, I mean he was sick.
He was
sick, but
they
it's
used
funny.
the leeches and stuff.
I know, but it was really funny all the things they did to him. And then the one doctor and they had so many doctors coming in, and then the one doctor actually suggested a new revolutionary thing that actually might have saved him in the end, and everyone rejected it because it was, he's George Washington. We can't go experimenting with these new procedures, and it actually might have worked, or at least, it is possible.
Damn.
Yeah, but yeah, that one was really interesting. Camp Death, that was a good one. That one actually didn't do super awesome, but it's actually really interesting about American Civil War camp. Yeah, it's good. People should go check it out.
Well, yeah, go subscribe to our fledgling channannels.
Yeah, fledgling.
And that would be grand. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
because we don't have a sponsor for this episode, so we still want to promote something, I guess.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Should we do some main course?
Main course. So we're going to talk about where did the spoons, knives, and forks. I mean, obviously, like we don't know who invented each one. They're kind of old, but kind of what's the progression here? Like where did they start? And for a lot of this, it's like surprisingly common for this all to be common. Just like something everyone uses, or surprisingly like a recent, I should say. Spoons, one of the oldest of them, along with knives, is the other one, the two of the three. So spoons seem to be obviously the early going. I mean, would you call it a spoon if it's like a scooping device that doesn't have a handle? Would you still say that's a spoon?
I mean, it depends if it's being used for the purpose of a spoon.
Yeah, if you're scooping. But at what point
if someone was like using
at what point is it a bowl? Like at what size point? When is the transition from a handleless spoon to a bowl?
Technically a spoon is just a bowl for ants.
Yeah, it's just exactly. So
that's what Confucius said.
Yeah, and so this humans have been using spoon-like things basically as long as we have history of people using anything to with food other than their fingers or whatever. So this was seemingly always a thing, and it was usually obviously things like seashells and rocks and conveniently shaped, or if they shaped them, little things. But we would have to fast forward some of the first handles were like dead animal bones when they finally started to add that. And so the archaeological evidence seems to point to once again, it's always the ancient Egyptians, man. They invented everything. They started seeming the first archaeological evidence of spoon or like handles on the spoons comes from them around maybe as early as 1000 BC, and these were animal bones and ivory and sometimes wood and whatnot. So and they also often covered in ornate decorations and hieroglyphics and stuff like that. But these were often used seemingly like ritualistically and stuff like that. So when it looks to like actually consuming food, those ones seem to be more just the sort of the common wood and everything. And so we have the ancient Greek and Romans. They started using like bronze and silver and stuff to actually use for eating food. Like, so they got really fancy for their food ones and not just the ceremonial ones. And so that was a thing among the wealthy, of course, not the plebeians. And that sort of remained the thing up to the Middle Ages. But what is this? If time, insert aluminum aside here. What was I even thinking there?
What do you want to talk about? Do you mean aluminium?
Yes. I think I was going to go with the that time. It was surprisingly recently in history that aluminium was cheaper than gold. It used to be much, much more expensive than gold until like the 1850s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they found that process with the, is it electrolysis?
Yes. Good memory.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Well, I remember doing experiments at school with electrolysis.
Oh, yeah. So before that, like to get to, even though aluminum is so common in the Earth's crust, like I don't remember, but it's like insanely common. So you'd think it would be really cheap as it is today. But before that, the process of actually, processing it and getting the thing was super expensive. And so like to have, there was some king who like boasted he had like a plate of aluminum and like some utensils or whatever. And it's like,
you were way more baller to have the aluminium plates and knives and forks than if you had gold.
Because like the world supply of that at the time was just like minuscule. Like you couldn't even make that much until that invention of that process, and then it just became super cheap and what.
You can see why people like alchemy, right?
Yeah. Like it's good
because aluminium was more rare than gold, and some dude figured out how to make it. I mean, essentially something worthless.
To extract it. So it had to have this common in the Earth's crust, but no one could make it, like the actual pure form of it. Like no one could process it until.
But it's also the problem with alchemy, because as soon as someone figured out, like, if it was possible to make gold from lead or whatever, it'd be like, well, it'll be like aluminium, isn't it? It'll be everywhere and it's not valuable at all.
Yeah. There is that one guy who did it, but what did it cost? Like I don't remember like how many. If he would make a
particle accelerator.
Yeah, he just made little particles of it basically, and then the actual usable amount. I don't remember. It was going to be something insane, the cost. But so
it was like more than all of the world's money to make like a few grams or something crazy.
Yeah. So going back to spoons. So the first documented evidence of spoons in England was not until 1259. It seems to be on itinerary item for King Edward I's wardrobe. He had a spoon. And so what do I have a note here? The mighty. Oh, yeah. Similar to the Egyptians, spoons at the time were not merely used for eating. They were very ornate, used for ceremonies. This was very for the wealth and power, because a spoon was like a status symbol. Like, oh yeah, I got a spoon. Like, and this again, it just sucked to live in the past. Like, a spoon is like, Yeah, crazy.
La-di-da.
Yeah. So yeah, this was used. This is why spoons are still kind of used in like ceremonial things and stuff. So like the coronation of every British king was preceded by a ritual in which the new monarch was anointed by a spoon.
Really?
Like a status.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and the spoons were gained further importance in the Tudor and Stuart periods. When it came customary to give an apostle spoon as a christening gift as well. So the wealthy, of course, we're going back to the wealthy. And the wealthy would do a set of 12 of these spoons, and the 13th was eventually
this still
added.
happens.
Does it? It's a master
I feel
spoon,
like
the
I
figure
know
of
this.
Christ. Yeah?
No, well, there's definitely something about giving spoons at a christening. I feel like I know this.
Yeah. All right. It's a British thing, I guess.
This feels super familiar for some reason. I guess, maybe. I don't know. Maybe maybe we made a video about it at some point.
Yeah.
I feel this is a thing.
Yeah, so that's spoons were quite ceremonial, and this is why they still are to some extent, the christening spoons, and even people when they travel to different countries, sometimes they'll collect spoons. You know, people do that. That's like a thing, and whatnot. So so that is kind of where all that came from. And so over time, of course, they started to progress to like silver, gold for the wealthy, and then as they became more common, and then copper and brass for the lower classes. But spoons kind of relatively recent as far as what we think of them, and as far as being common, I should say, like in a lot of places for the lower classes to use. But yeah, and this was the point that I thought was going to be in the last section. So ancient spoons in China, they had them, and they also featured, some of them at least, some examples that have survived, a pointy end. And so you could use it as a prong like a fork or a knife. So the ancient Chinese, they invented the spork or the knife, is basically what they had, like an all-in-one thing. Quite good. So now,
pretty useful.
Yeah, it is. Moving on to the fork. So this is the most recent addition of all of them. So technically, though, they've existed since ancient times, but they weren't really a thing at all until much, much more recently, because, of course, people could just, the more common, even when spoons became like common, it was just finger spoons and knives. Because, you got fingers. What do you need a fork for? So you can use that. But
God
they do
gave you perfectly good fingers.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. So they did debut, though, in ancient Egypt, because the Egyptians invented everything. And then also the Chinese invented everything else. So the Kiji culture in 2400 to 1900.
The Egyptians said everything, invented everything, Confucius said everything.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the... so...
Good luck with that.
Yeah, so...
Quidja.
Yeah, whatever. Kijia. I don't know. Anyways,
when you're not following a Q with a U, I'm gonna get confused.
Yeah. So they used forks and whatnot. So, but in the Western world, this sort of spread in the beginning via the Silk Road into Venice, and then from there, this is where we get into the sinful nature of forks. So, and I kind of was wondering about this. I didn't actually look this part up. I wanted to. I don't know if you know this. Is that why the devil is always, or is often depicted with a pitchfork? Like, because the fork was considered sinful? Did this come from this era? Like this perception?
Wait, you're just asking me if I randomly happen to know this?
You've done so many videos. Did you ever come across this? Like, why a pitchfork?
No, I feel
okay.
like, I think I made a business Blaze video about it, and I probably made a joke that this, because he's got a pitchfork, ha ha ha. Yeah. But no, I don't actually know whether that's a fact.
Yeah, well, because that's like a common depiction. And I was wondering, because this forks being sinful,
it would make sense
for a long time. So maybe it came from that. But I have no idea. We should look that up at some point. But so, anyways, the earliest.
You were like, rather than Google this, I'm just going to ask Simon. Maybe he'll know.
Yeah, who knows? I'm sure someone might ring in the comments, maybe, and they'll tell us, and then we could talk about it next time, or probably. Maybe I'll remember to look it up.
If anyone's still listening at this point.
If I don't die in a plane crash, I might look it up for the next episode. But so Venice, 11th century, the Byzantine princess Theodora Anna Ducania, she got married to Domenico Selvo, and she brought, as part of her dowry, gold forks. And this was quite the scandal, because the God-fearing Venetians, they saw these, pronged monstrosities as a slight to the Lord, as noted by St. Peter Damian. He's a saint, so he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, he knows it. God in his wisdom has provided man with natural forks, his fingers. Therefore, it is an insult to him to substitute artificial metal forks for them when eating.
It's so funny because so many of these things like this you look at and it's like it so just strikes of like the old guy who's like, oh, we don't like that change around these parts, like and so it just sort of becomes like
get off my lawn while you're at it.
Yeah, it's not like really
with
anything
your bloody
scriptural
forks
or anything like that, because if you look at the book of first book of Samuel 2:13, they thought to be composed around 640 to 540 BC. The Jewish priests used forks. So, and so we have a quote here from that.
We, the Jewish priests, find forks awesome. No, it doesn't really. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant came while the flesh was in seething with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand. I like that they call forks flesh hooks.
Yeah. And so this...
would you get me a
Saint
flesh
Peter
hook
maybe
and a knife?
St. Peter should crack his Bible sometime and read it. But so he's just like an old man, get off my lawn with the forks. But this was a popular perception anyway, despite the trivial mentions in the Holy Scripture itself of the priest's own servants, the priests no less, using forks in a religious thing. But nevertheless, the poor fork, and Theodora was quite vilified for this and her perceived eccentricities of like excesses that she had, because she also used napkins. That was another thing that was quite the scandal.
Oh my God, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, and she died 2 years later.
Let's burn her. Napkin using witch.
Yeah, I know, right? Burn her. She died a couple years later of a mysterious degenerative disease, and this was thought by some to be attributed to her excesses and like use of fork and napkins and things like that.
Sounds scientific.
Yeah. So this perception, in the Western world at least, of forks, it carried a stigma for quite a long time and associated with Eastern decadence. So it was also like not just an affront to God. It's like, oh, you're so fancy, with your forks and whatnot. So we got fingers. We don't need it. We don't need any of that around these parts. So it wasn't like popular or what until. So the fork's popularity started growing popular around the 16th century when the trendsetter Catherine de Medici sort of helped popularize the fork, as well as she also helped popularize pasta, olive oil, all this sort of stuff from, and stuff around, the Renaissance and stuff in Italy was quite in vogue and whatnot. So that kind of helped as well. And what also helped, if you notice, we mentioned the 16th century, and if people were paying attention on that bathing episode, why people stopped using bathhouses, this was also around the time diseases were just going rampant, and everyone at this point, of course, you used your fingers, spoons and knives, and if you had spoons and knives, most people at least had the knife, as we'll get into shortly. But fingers, disease rampant, everyone sharing bowls, like it's not ideal. If you can use a fork, that's probably going to be better. So this also kind of helped spur the popularity of the fork to the masses. But still, it was still kind of the wealthy at first because, the commoners didn't have money for no fancy forks. But one thing that stopped its popularity a little bit in the beginning was it also considered very feminine to use a fork. And so men were kind of rejecting it for that reason. Until they started making them ornate with like ruffled edges, like make them more ornate, which we would consider a little bit more feminine. But at the time, of course, this was when the men were wearing high heels, makeup, doing their hair fancy, tights, dresses. They had the whole thing going, and that was the style for men. That was very masculine at the time. So ruffled cuffs were good.
When umbrellas were first introduced, it was the same thing. They were thought to be just for women.
No.
And men would be laughed at if they used an umbrella because it was feminine. And the consensus was men weren't affected by the rain in the same way that women were. Yeah. It was like it just magically goes around them.
Yeah. That's interesting too. In Seattle area, which is kind of known for its rain, but actually Seattle doesn't get nearly as much rain as like New York and like places like this. But whatever.
We made a video about this.
Yeah. Seattle actually is really low.
In Seattle.
Yeah, in Seattle. Yeah, we did, and it was a sunny day too, which was quite fortuitous. And whatnot. That was funny. We were on that escalator and walking around with you get stopped a lot. Like, so we go to the restaurants. It's like, hey, Simon. And then we were on the elevator. Remember that up to to the Space Needle, and someone was like, "Hey, you know what I learned?"
Embarrassing.
Yeah, it was, because he pulled it off like the elevator guy was like, "So I learned something interesting today," and he's like looking at you significantly, and then he's like he starts talking about it, and it was like, and then like everyone is like,
Hello, friends.
Yeah, it was like good. No, I mean it's nice, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's always nice. Like, I have no problem with it, and I always like it. But
no,
it's
but I
like...
would, if I was you, I would be like, "Oh no, thank you."
No, it's cool.
talking.
It's just I often don't know
No.
what to say, especially like when it's in front of a group of people.
Oh yeah,
You're
because that was like
okay.
there's probably like I don't know 15 people in that elevator or
It's a
something.
pretty crammed elevator. Yeah.
Yeah. But so Seattle doesn't get much rain. But my point to that was nobody uses an umbrella here really, because it just doesn't. It's just like mists. You know, like it rarely ever rains like you would get in like New York, or like this is why Seattle actually doesn't get that much rainfall. It just gets a lot of days of like cloudiness basically. So no one like here. That's like not really a thing, but people often think it would be. But no, because it never really rains, so it might like be misting. And so what do you need an umbrella? That's just something to carry. But in any event,
Neat.
yeah. So going on to where are we now? By the 18th century, we had a little advancement in forks. They started to be curved, which actually helps it use as like a spoon a little bit, that's a significant.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, that's a significant upgrade. Because it's
Dude, if I was asked to make a fork, like someone was like showing me their workshop and was like, "Here's how you make things out of metal," I'd be like, "Great," and they're like, "Make a fork." I'm pretty sure I wouldn't curve it. And then I'd be like, "What's wrong with my fork?"
Yeah, because
it would take me a while to get there.
And it wouldn't work nearly as well, like for some of the stuff you use it. Like it's a little more purpose. So that 18th century is when curved forks started to be a thing to help with certain foods. But again, still primarily used by the upper classes. If you were poor, you probably didn't have a fork. You probably, whatnot. So it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that it started to become a thing. Where like everyone was just using forks and whatnot. And forks, of course, quickly surpassed knives, which was why the commoners didn't quite need it as much, because a knife could be functioned, as we'll get into shortly, as a fork to some extent. Then it's a staple all to this day. But that one, pretty recent, which is another crazy thing. You go back to like medieval times and you're like, hey, you guys don't even have forks, really. I mean, kind of, but not really. Well, I guess if you're in Italy, maybe. But yeah. And you just think like how many common things like that you could go back that just revolutionize everything for people. And if you just like go back in time and just simple things like that, like, hey, we're gonna do spoons and forks and everything. You're gonna be like burned at the stake.
Going back to before the wheel and being like, if we get the circular thing, drill a hole in the middle of it and run something through it. Check this out.
Yeah,
people will be like, whoa.
This is but as we see, humans resist change. So actually, if you introduced a bunch of these things all at once,
that's okay. I'll just roll away from them real fast.
Yeah, if you're really wealthy and powerful, then you can introduce all sorts of fun things and people would go along. But if you're just a commoner, you're just some guy and you're just like, hey, I got some ideas. You're like, burn him, like he's a witch. But yeah, so moving on, we're going to look at knives now. So knives, obviously, much like the spoon, kind of been around since prehistoric times, but important here is that they were dually always used, not just for food, like they were used for lots of things. So like, hunting, like you're just cutting stuff around. Like it wasn't the sort of the domesticated knife, the one that used exclusively for table use was only about a half a millennia ago is when that became a thing. Before that, the knives were always dual purpose, which is not ideal. You're using your knife for cutting stuff, random stuff, and then eating. That's not a good way to, that's not sanitary.
It's not great, but I've done it camping loads of times. You like cut it up and then you stab it and it's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not ideal, but it's a nice, I like it when I'm,
But you can see a problem with
roasting
this.
a big piece of something on a fire and.
Yeah. If a knife, though.
Daily use.
If a knife is the most popular utensil, which it was for a long time, at the table, and they're sharp and pointy, and everyone's drinking like ale and stuff like that instead of water is like a common getting drunk, this is a problem. Like when you're stabbing food, stick it in your mouth. It's not ideal for that. And
it's not like you get a lot of stabbings at steakhouses, It's
no,
not
but
like steakhouses are famous for their murders.
Yeah, but if you're sufficiently drunk, you're probably stabbing yourself in the mouth. And this does seem to have been a problem. Like King Louis the 24th.
Oh, this is for like people hurting themselves.
Yeah, eating, like stabbing.
I think more like jumping over the table and stabbing each other because, they want each other's fiefdoms or some stuff like that.
But if you're slightly inebriated and you're like jamming stuff in your mouth, whatnot, it could be a problem. And that's why 1669 Louis the 24th, he outlawed sharp knives at the table to be replaced with blunter, wider ones, which is sort of what seems to have given us the dedicated sort of knife, kitchen knife we would think of today, sort of the your butter knife style type thing. So to sort of avoid accidentally puncturing mouths and whatnot. So that recently, that's the 17th century. This dedicated knife as we would think of it before. It was not really. You wouldn't have these things. You would just everyone just kind of had knives, some sort of knife thing to use around, and that was it used. And it's important to note here also, like up until I think it was the Industrial Revolution. I didn't put in the notes, but people started to, like, if you were wealthy enough to have a cutlery set, it was traditional to bring your own. Like, even if you were dining with a lot of the wealthy people, to bring your own set if you had it.
Wow.
And even the commoners, when it sort of became common, it was you would bring your own stuff. And then, of course, it became so cheap that people just, you have like a million spoons and forks and knives in your drawers. So, it's like you can provide if people come over. Things
I think I don't have enough of. Rarely forks.
Yeah. So if you do that, like when you're talking about the dedicated spoon, knife, and fork, where it's dedicated just for eating stuff and common folk, we're talking, not that long ago, like where that wasn't a thing, really. If you're wealthy, that's about it. So. Yeah, so that is... As
we've discussed a lot in these podcast episodes, you definitely don't want to be a peasant in the past. You don't even have a fork.
Yeah, that's like such a fundamental thing that we take for granted. And you think like, okay, these things, how much that we just take for granted of the common things that they could have made back then that they just didn't because they didn't think about it. Like they were just... Like you'd go back and it would be such a culture shock to be just like, whoa, like that's weird.
You always think about like going back and inventing like the microwave.
Yeah,
or the internet,
but no,
or the car. And it's like, just invent the fork, guys,
and then make it curved. Make it curved, and you'll really blow people's minds. So the dessert for today,
and also I could if someone sent me back to the 1950s and we're like, okay, we're going to invent the microwave, I'll be like, oh god, I don't remember anything. It'd be like, it uses waves. Use the waves, scientists. Come on, something to do with radar.
Yeah, that was how it was invented. That was a really interesting. Then he didn't even have a grammar school education, and he just sort of made him. So he was from this small town, and they wanted to do, what was it? It wasn't radar to start. Well, it was just something to wire up something, and he just made himself an expert at it. Just read some books, and then got the job to wire up the town with something with electricity, and then just from there.
Wait, no, he was definitely working on the guy who invented the microwave.
Yeah, that was his start. So he had like no education. I don't remember what he did. And that was like his start, like when he was looking for a job and someone was hiring to do some sort of electrification of something. I don't remember the details, but so he just made himself an expert on how to do it. And I mean, like by expert, I mean like he probably just read how to wire stuff up at that point. But then he just continued to self-educate to the point where he became the world leader, the greatest mind on radar technology, and made so many advancements and everything all just from self-taught. And then eventually, of course, they used to stand in front of the radar things to warm up and stuff, and then they eventually realized that he had that chocolate bar melt in his pocket, and then he go, hey,
that's right,
we can warm some food up. Let's see. And then they did the egg. I think the first one was the egg, and it blew up in their faces. So then they were like, hey, we should contain this so that it doesn't blow up in our faces. So then it's good.
Maybe this is doing something to our eyes.
Yeah. No, I mean, as long as you don't turn it up too much, you're not going to hurt yourself. It's just, but that you really need to know what you're doing, because if you turn that up too much, and then you can just boil your insides, and it's not going to be severe burns, and not going to be good. But they did it. They knew what they were doing, I suppose. So moving on from forks, spoons, and knives, we're going to talk about the origin of the fortune cookie, because this is just sort of speaking of Asian-y things in food. I thought it'd be a good dessert because it is, sort of traditional dessert item. So, and a lot of people have misconceptions of where did the fortune cookie come from. So it's commonly said this is just a sort of American thing, like it's just invented in America, and it's from just pretend Chinese. That's neither of those is true. And then so where are we in the notes now? I've completely lost my place. Yes.
However, you'll not find fortune cookies
in actual
Chinese restaurants.
Yeah, so even though it wasn't invented in America, so we've established that it's not an American thing. So people, all right, well, it's in Chinese restaurants. Surely it's in China. No, it's not a thing. And even Wonton Food tried to introduce the fortune cookie to China, and they gave it 3 years, a 3-year marketing campaign and everything, and it just never caught on. Which is a little weird because like the Chinese don't really have like desserts and stuff like traditionally like we would think of it, like especially you talk like the French or something like that, like do like so many.
French love their desserts.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so weird because like why, you have this large group of humans, why don't they still, necessarily have like all these dessert items like they would think? Why the French and not like, it's sort of weird to think about, like, culturally, like how did that progress? But anyways.
You could also argue, why do the French still have dessert? I mean, you could say, like, why not just eat one big, healthier, savory meal and not fill yourself with sugar afterwards?
Yeah, I mean,
why do we still do that?
Yeah, well, because
we're already all too fat.
Yeah, Yeah, it's quite fascinating.
It's not like we're like, oh, we've got to get those calories in.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, I suppose, the thing with chopsticks versus spoons and stuff like that. It's just sort of interesting how like one culture can progress that way, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna use these and other. Anyway, so Wonton Foods tries to introduce it to China. It doesn't work out. So Chinese didn't invent it. Americans didn't invent it. Where did it come from? And it is primarily consumed in America. Do you have, like, is fortune cookies really a thing in Europe? In Chinese?
Not here. I live in the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
No. In the UK? Yes.
Okay.
I think. But not always.
All right. Yeah, so
like I've definitely had them, and I feel like maybe they would come with a Chinese takeaway or after a Chinese meal, but not always, I don't think.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating.
Wait, so where did they come from?
Not invented in China, not invented in America, but they are Chinese restaurants in America. So how did this come to be? So who invented it? It turns out it was the Japanese who did it. And some people say the Japanese invented it in America. That's sort of the next sort of myth that comes about. And it turns out that one's not accurate either. The Japanese invented it in Japan. Funny enough. So
weird.
I know, right? But the reason why this sort of myth, because it's actually recently discovered that it was invented in Japan in the 1990s. A researcher known as Yasuko Nakamichi. So he encountered, he's in Japan, obviously, and he encounters a fortune cookie-shaped cracker called the Sujuro Senbai, made by hand in a family bakery in Sohanke Hagiokudo, near the Shinto shrine outside of Kyoto, Japan. And so then this gets him thinking, like, this looks like a fortune cookie, and not only that, it has a fortune slip inside called the omikuji, and traditionally sold in shrines and temples. So what he got to wondering is, did this predate the fortune cookie in America? So it was Japanese. Pretty much all the stories of the fortune cookie popping up in America come from Japanese immigrants. So did it predate, though? Did these ones predate? And so then he started doing some research back to see. And it should be noted here, these crackers that were created here at the shrines or whatever were cooked. They pour batter into waffle iron-like molds and then hold the irons over coals. That's sort of the traditional way. And then while the cracker's still warm, they fold it over and put the little thing inside. And also around in Japan, they also used to do that with candy. Apparently that was the thing traditionally. But they put like little slips of things, some paper inside with some writings on it. So did it predate the U.S. ones, though, when they popped up in the U.S.? And so you seemingly would be the case, but it turns out not by a long time by the evidence he could find. So 1878, he found a picture of an apprentice baker making these fortune cookies in a bakery. And so the depiction of making it was exactly like he observed in more modern times, the way they made it. So the book was the 19th century book. It was Moshiogusa Kinsai Kiden, and it does in fact predate the fortune cookie popping up in America by about 3 decades. So this was sort of the earliest. So about 3 decades before they were making it. And further evidence pointing to, once again, is the descendants of 2 of the first bakeries to make fortune cookies in the U.S. And one of them actually is still in operation today. They still have their original iron kata grills, and they are exactly the same as the ones used in these shrines and whatnot. So that seems to be...
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it came at least that far back.
Pretty
in Japan.
Clear.
Yeah, pretty clear. But that's more of like a recent discovery. So how, you might be asking, okay, so they're Japanese, brought here by Japanese immigrants, and they're the ones popping it up. Why is it a Americanized Chinese food restaurant thing? And that one, nobody knows for sure, but there are a few contributing factors that seem to all kind of have played. And World War II seems to have been a big part of that. So at this point, you did have the Japanese internment, and all things Japanese became very unpopular in America for a bit there. And so, we're gonna. I really need to. We have a story of this, the accidental farmer. There's this guy. I want to do a video on it because it's really good. It'd be really good for highlight history to cover. This guy, he basically, all these Japanese people around him, these families that he knew and whatnot, got interned, and so all their farms, nobody's doing anything with them. Like, they're just not getting plowed, and this is their livelihood. They got to keep up the farms. So he just took them all over and started doing, like, all the ones around him, started doing it for them and making the money for them and keeping their farm up, keep their fields. And then when they came back, all their stuff was still all good, and he had the money for them and everything. It's like a really good story. This guy, I think it was, it's a good highlight history one. We should totally do.
I like it.
Quite fascinating and like a cool story. But anyways, so you had this all things Japanese becoming unpopular, and at this point, they did in California, the Chinese restaurants seem to have picked up the fortune cookie, and seems to be like maybe because they didn't really have dessert items, and Americans like dessert items, so it's kind of like an easy, quick dessert item, and kind of coming over from the Japanese people who were making them, and they would obviously sell them to anyone, so that seems to be a contributing factor. But that is where it spread, though. After World War II, you had a lot of soldiers going off back home, so the Pacific Theater and everything, and they stationed in California, where they got accustomed to these Chinese restaurant fortune cookies, and then they would go back and they sort of request, and it sort of spread from there, from California and the Chinese restaurants. But yeah, exactly, like the exact origin of how that kind of transition it's not really clear, but it seems to be like around that time when Japanese stuff became very unpopular, and then it kind of just percolated over to the Chinese, and then it just became, Chinese cuisine, a bit more popular there anyway. So then it just became associated with Chinese stuff. And I don't know, like Japanese restaurants, I don't even know if there's one around me, which, do they have fortune cookies still? I don't know.
I don't know. Definitely not here. There's sushi restaurants, I guess
yeah, kind of. But yeah, they don't.
Japanese, but there's also a few around here. They don't give me a fortune cookie when I go, but maybe they just don't like me.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it's still
Simon guy's back.
Still a thing, but so it's not quite clear, but it seems to be something to do with that. Like when the Japanese kind of got all displaced, and then it kind of transitioned. Some of the Chinese restaurants took over some of making some of these things, and then just got associated with Americanized Chinese restaurants anyway. Invented by the Japanese in Japan, turns out. And
there you go. I like it.
Today's episode.
That's today's episode.
Yeah.
All right. What do we need to say? Leave us a review. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with another. Do we know what's coming up next?
I have yes. Well, yeah, I think the origin of everyday things, and we're going to talk about text messages and some other stuff, which is quite fascinating.
That's right.
Yeah, and I have some
I'm
stuff.
excited to get started.
I have a series on the Queen we're going to do too coming up, which is going to be really good.
God save her.
Yeah. I always, whenever we're planning something and I announce something like that, I so don't die. Like, don't die until because she's so old,
No, if she died, it'd be even more popular because people were like, oh, that's,
yeah, I guess.
That's trending.
The part that is hard though is sometimes when it's like, what powers does the Queen have or something like that? It's like, ooh, you'd have to do a major rewrite.
Well, you could say definitely not the power over life and death.
Yeah. And so, yeah, but we'll do a series on some stuff with the Queen, which is quite good. And good.
She'll probably live for a while. Her whole family live forever. Like
That's
they're
good.
some sort of
That's
half
good.
vampires.
Yeah.
All right, well, good. I look forward to it. We'll record that soon. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode about the Queen and